She has taught in a number of schools, and at the moment, she is heading up the education space at Kagiso Trust. She's head of the education unit. She has many, many years, not just in executive leadership, but she has also many, many years of teaching experience as well as leadership experience at school. So Caesar brings with her a wealth of knowledge, both in the Kagiso Trust space, where a lot of education projects are underway under her leadership, but she is also bringing with her the person on the ground space with her many years of experience of leading within schools. And she's also in good company because she also has held positions in the labor unions as well. Mom Caesar, over to you for the welcome address.
Thank you so much, Prof. Can I just check if you can hear me? I'm using headphones.
We can hear you and we can see you.
Thank you so much. And I would like to open and welcome you with the words of Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I want to forward a warm welcome to KT and UJ executives and their staffs and team and the entire education ecosystem present today. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say a good warm welcome from Gqeberha Airport, where I am currently. It is a privilege to welcome you to this conference under the theme Leading with Integrity, Reimagining Ethical Educational Leadership for Transformative Learning. For us, as Prof has said, I think it's a privilege that one has been in the space of education, which has brought the wisdom that leading with integrity is not just a personal virtue. It is a professional imperative for principals, teachers, and officials at all levels of the system. Integrity is the compass that guides how we make decisions, allocate and use the resources that we have to serve our clients. In KT, we refer to learners, the communities, and everyone that we serve as clients. And it means for us that creating school environments, fairness, and accountability are not negotiable, but lived values. Fortunate enough, integrity is one of Kagiso Trust values, which is a foundation. Look at values as the foundation. When educational leaders act with integrity, they build trust among the learners and the communities, setting the tone for ethical behavior across the system. Yet, integrity alone is not enough. In a rapid changing world where we find ourselves, we are called to reimagine what ethical leadership looks like in practice. Leadership, it is leadership that does more than keeping an order, saying, let's follow the rules. We have these school rules, we have the school act, but it is actively more about transforming learning. This means leading with vision in shaping the schools and the system that prepare learners not only for examinations, like we're in the period of exams, but for life, for citizenship, and for the challenges of tomorrow. All of us here were being called to respond to deep inequalities, the shifting social needs that we observe, and the rapid pace of change brought by technology and globalism. Those are the things that cannot be ignored. Therefore, ethical leadership challenges all of us to ask critical questions. How do we lead in ways that put learners at the center, that inspire truth, trust, and that creates environments where transformation is possible? It requires us to move beyond compliance to a deeper moral purpose. As partners, Kagiso Trust and UJ, we are so honored that in preparing for today, we ensure that the speakers we are bringing are the speakers that will share their knowledge. We have Dr. Nxasana, who will be our keynote speaker. I won't dwell much on what he's going to say. Just make sure that when your friends are not here, you call them. And we have Cynthia, Miss Cynthia, who will share with us on being an effective and ethical leader. What does it mean for that? She will highlight the ethical leadership competency model, where she'll be unpacking the importance of leadership, power, and influence, highlighting how these concepts can be applied at the school leadership level. Dr. Blosse and Mr. Baloyi will be speaking about being a principal and being part of the union. We know these days sometimes unions are seen as disruptors, but sometimes they are a positive disruptor. They will highlight the dynamic of wearing those two hats and how to navigate it in an ethical way, in a responsible way. And our residence Prof Kat, will share about AI and the ethical compass of school leadership. She will also share the work that she is currently doing in one of her leadership classes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I humbly invite you that over the next 2 days, let us challenge ourselves to think boldly, to share openly, and to commit to leading with courage and moral purpose. Because when we lead ethically, we make transformative learning not just possible, but inevitable. May we continue to ignite human capacity by leading in ways that ensure that change is just, it is inclusive, and lasting. I wish us all a fruitful and inspiring conference. And back to you, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Caesar. It's I think your words of advice that it's leadership is much more than simply compliance. We are called towards a deeper moral purpose. And I think this kind of conversations begin in our homes and in our schools, and our leaders have the moral responsibility to make sure that these happen. So thank you so much for that really warm welcome. And definitely we are going to have great engagement. And the very first thing that we are going to do, Ma'am Caesar, is get our audience to participate in a Mentimeter exercise. Colleagues, friends, and everybody in the room, there will be a link to a Mentimeter exercise that is put into the chat. And the question that we have for you is, what does it mean to lead ethically and with integrity? You can provide your opinion on this question. And hopefully we will be able to then reflect back after we have our keynote address on how you feel about the purpose of leading ethically and with integrity. So the question again, what does it mean to lead ethically and with integrity? And then without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Sizwe Kasana, who is a South African business leader and education innovator. He holds a PhD in education from Aalborg University and is a chartered accountant. He was the CEO of Telkom South Africa and FirstRand Banking Group, and has founded Sizwe and Company and SMG Grant Thornton. He leads the Sifiso Learning Group and chairs the National Education Collaboration Trust, or the NECT, and the ISFAP to support education and students. He's received honorary doctorates from 5 universities for his contributions to education and business. Dr. Sizwe, we are really looking forward to your conversation that you bring to us with this amazing portfolio and the wonderful work that you've been doing both as a businessman, but also within the realm of education. And we look forward to the conversation that you bring to us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really privileged and honored to have been invited to be part of this very, very important conversation. I hope you can see my screen.
We can see your screen and we can hear you loud and clear. Thanks, Doc.
Good. Right, so, you know, this conference, especially about leading with ethical integrity, is particularly important given the context of where we are as a country. Every day when we open our televisions or read newspapers or follow social media, we read about many, many things that are occurring and happening in our country that are of concern, that go to the root of how, as a nation, we seem to be floundering, we seem to be questioning what leadership and ethics should be. We see our leaders sometimes very often lead with unethical behavior, with a lot of confidence sometimes that you see and you wonder, you know, what has gone wrong? And it is in this context that this discussion is really important, because particularly in the schools context, we sit in a very, very privileged position where we interact with young people who are able to shape their views, who are able to shape their values, who are able to actually influence society and communities around which our schools are based. And I must acknowledge that all of this happens in the context of schools themselves that are under pressure. We see, for instance, the delays and the slowness in delivering schools and infrastructure with overcrowded classrooms. But having said all of that, we must recognize that schools play a really, really important role in the lives of young people. Very often, our learners come from dysfunctional homes, from families, structures that have been dissipated by many, many ills and problems that we face in our country, including poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And very often, the schools present the only area where our learners and our young people have stability. Sometimes it's the only place where they get food. And very often, it is the only place where they get hope about their lives and about the future that they can play in society broadly. So as I go into this presentation, I'm not going to talk too much about, we know what our Constitution provides, especially when it comes to the Bill of Rights, the rights of children, which are enshrined in our Constitution. The Schools Act, as well as the Bella Act, provide a really good legislative framework around which our schools must operate. But I'm going to talk about a number of things that are really important, especially for us as leaders. And this is about social justice, because social justice really goes to the root of whether, as a nation, we have the soul for our children, we have the heart for our children. Because we've seen that since 1994, significant milestones have been made in a number of areas that include, for instance, the migration of early childhood education to the Department of Basic Education, introduction of, we have mathematics in our country that is compulsory, especially up to grade 9. And I'm going to touch on the issue of mathematics later on in my talk. And we now have the introduction of 3-stream curricula, the pioneering subjects that have been introduced by the departments such as coding and robotics. But having said all of this and looking at all these progressive developments that have taken place, including the fact that almost 9 million of our children are part of the National Nutrition Program, so they get food from schools every day. So as a country, we've made significant progress in meeting some of our obligations that are enshrined in our Constitution. But having said this, it is important outside the constitutional or even legislative framework to just go back to the basics of us as people. And that's why when we explore the concept of Ubuntu, especially around its importance in driving inclusion and understanding that each one of us, especially for the young people, if we're putting our learners at the center of everything that we do as education leaders, as school leaders, we can do so with a compassion that makes sure that those young people get hope, are given a chance to succeed in life, and are able to support themselves and the communities around them. So it is in this regard that it is really important to emphasize the importance of the values of Ubuntu just as human beings, especially in the African context, because this can really pave the way for a lot of young people who are told that they must go to school and their lives are going to be better. But very constantly, we see millions of them exit the schooling system and they are not able to find jobs, they're not able to fend for themselves and their families. So there are a number of systemic and structural issues which we must confront in our country. And for me, this is all about leadership, and leadership which is visionary, leadership which is accountable, leadership that drives the values in our education system that in turn are going to be imparted on our young learners. And it is about making sure that you're doing the right thing as a leader. It doesn't matter that you are a member of a school management team or you are a teacher, because if as a teacher you're a leader, a lot of those young people look up to you to inspire them, to give them hope. So whatever you do as an educator in the classroom, in the school management team, as a principal, in the circuit, in the district, or even at a provincial or national level, has major implications and impact on a lot of our young people. So it is about seeing the opportunities for change, even when things are tough. As I said earlier, we live in a country where we face, we see schools, particularly schools in rural areas and townships where resources are limited. But leaders, regardless of the conditions where the schools are located, play a really important role in making sure that we can shape the young people, we can shape communities and societies around which our schools are located. And this requires that as leaders, we are interactive, we interact with parents, we interact with educators, we interact with all the broader stakeholders that are part and parcel of the education ecosystem. Because after all, leadership in an education context is about service. And I'm going to touch a little bit about this issue of power and leadership, because very often we have a number of people who get appointed to the positions of principals or HODs in schools, as an example, and they have positional power. They have power over others. They can make decisions that have a direct impact on the lives of others. And this is where, on a day-to-day basis, we must reflect on our actions and what we do, because I've seen many instances, in fact, I've experienced some of them myself as a growing young leader, where you have leaders who are abusing their power and authority, who exercise bullying, and bullying is a big issue in schools, who are unfair in how they conduct other people, including other teachers or even learners for that matter, who are obsessed about power, who are vindictive, or otherwise who are absent. I work quite a lot in public schools these days, and it surprises me when you go to some schools where you never find a principal, you never find some members of the school management team on campus. And sometimes they're busy with things, yes, that may have something to do with education, but very often, you find a lot of cases where people are simply just absent. They are resigned, they are absent. And this is what I call the dark side of power, because as leaders, we have had a very important role to play in making sure that we treat others with fairness, that we do not bully others, that we encourage a culture within schools and the education ecosystem that is fair, where we can eliminate, bullying, that we are not vindictive. So these are really some of the important things that we have to, as leaders, embrace and practice in our everyday life. One of the most important aspects of leadership is learning. So if as a leader, you're not learning, you're not growing, obviously very often you're going to stifle the ability of others, especially those that you lead, to grow. And it is important that schools are microcosms of learning, not just for learners, but also for educators. And it is important to understand that we can't leave the duty of teacher professional development just to government. It is important for us as leaders in schools, whether we are principals or members of the school management teams, to create a culture of learning, to organize school-based professional development for our educators. And this will make sure that our educators sharpen their skills of teaching and leading in the classroom. It is important as educators that, especially in the context of South Africa, because we still have the legacy of apartheid, that we believe in our learners. We believe that our learners, especially those learners that are African, that they have the same DNA, they have the same opportunity to learn. All we need to do as educators is to give them challenging learning experiences as young people that are going to make sure that those young people are inspired, are given the opportunities to succeed, and then they're given an opportunity to become important members of society in the future. And this is particularly important in the context of the 21st century, where the world of work is changing very rapidly because of technology, because of changes in industries throughout the world. And as educators, we need to empower ourselves to understand what kind of skills and competencies we need to impart on young people. So it's beyond the knowledge. So if you look at the 3-stream curriculum that the Department of Basic Education is now introducing, it recognizes that since 1994, we've been focusing as a country on imparting knowledge, but that is no longer enough. What we need to do is to make sure that we're imparting knowledge as well as the skills and competencies of young people to navigate this fast-changing world. Give them skills to solve problems, to think critically, to collaborate and work with others, and to be creators and to be entrepreneurs. And this is a responsibility that we can only execute as leaders in education if we ourselves continue to learn so that we can impart these skills, because you can't impart something you don't have yourself. And at this point, I just want to talk about mathematics. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, because when you look at our economy, the South African economy is dominated by financial services, is dominated by tourism, is dominated by mining. When you look at those areas and sectors of our economy, they require a large number of our young people who are competent in mathematics. So when we talk about inclusion and the importance of making sure that our young people are meaningfully participating in the economy when they finish school, it is important to talk about the crisis that we face in mathematics in South Africa. So I just want to go back to the history of the politics of mathematics. When the Nationalist Party came into power in 1948, and you had Hendrik Verwoerd, who came in as the Prime Minister of the country at the time, he made a very important statement as part of the apartheid architecture that says, what's the use of teaching the Bantu people mathematics, and where are we going to use this? But if we fast track and we go to the current South Africa, where the majority of our children are doing mathematics literacy, The question that we need to ask ourselves is whether we continue on the architecture of apartheid, in other words, of excluding particularly a lot of those that come from the non-fee paying schools, the quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools, because when you look at the graph which I'm showing now, you will see that there's been a significant increase in the number of our learners who, by various reasons, are directed towards mathematics literacy. Very often, schools and school leadership has a very important role to play in, directing our learners to areas where they're going to make our schools' results look good. But often it's not about the quality of the results, it's about the quantity of the results. So we've got to be cognizant of the fact that when it comes to particularly the issue of inclusion of our young people, those people that do mathematics very often find better opportunities even in schools. Often you are in your class A or maybe class B if you are considered to be good at mathematics. We have much richer learning experiences taught by teachers who are considered to be the best, especially in the STEM subjects. But I want to argue that all our learners in the South African system have the ability to do mathematics, and we need to give them the opportunity, because that paves the way and opens the way for them to really pursue careers that are often those that are in high demand, often that are high-paying jobs. Because when you look at this graph that I'm just sharing now, you will see that just up to 2023, in fact, the results in the class of 2024 are very similar, with something like 44,000 learners who got more than 60% in mathematics out of the over 700,000 learners that wrote mathematics. So this has major implications for the lives of these young people. A lot of them become the statistics of the unemployed because they cannot even, some of them, pursue careers in TVET colleges, at universities, or even those that may want to pursue, careers that are offered by corporates. Because without mathematics, the options that are available to a lot of these young people are very limited. Now, leaders in education, in schools, in circuits and districts and provinces, as well as national, Department of Basic Education, have a very important role to play in understanding the crisis that we face and the role that we as leaders play in either contributing to the statistics and the growing statistics of young people who are excluded from meaningful economic participation, or otherwise, limiting the number of young people who are exposed to richer learning experiences. And when you look at the graph that I'm sharing right now, it shows that when you look at grade 10s, there's an increasing number of schools that are stopping to offer mathematics altogether. Now, you may ask, why is this relevant in the context of integrity and ethics? Our role as leaders, as I said earlier, in fact, as Sizang Pathwe said in her introduction, our role as leaders is to offer hope, is to be visionary, is to be ethical, and act with integrity. Now, if we are deliberately, because of our own personal maybe benefits, channeling young people in those areas that are going to close a lot of doors in their faces, clearly, in the context of inclusion, in the context of social justice, we're excluding a lot of those young people. So we have to put the learners, as it was eloquently said by Sizang Pathwe, at the center of what we're doing as young people. And I just want to share another area. We did, as the NECT, a study in 142 schools in term 1 of this year. And we're looking at how much based on the number of learning days that are available in term 1, how many days are spent by learners by examining their exercise books as well as the workbooks? How much writing is taking place if we just take term 1 and term 2 in grade 4 in those 142 schools that were considered to be the best performing schools? And the picture is really depressing, because what you see here is that very often teachers who are leaders in their classrooms are spending very little time. There's hardly any writing taking place in learners' exercise books in mathematics. We just took mathematics and we took, FAL, or as well as home language. I've just taken mathematics here particularly to illustrate the point. You can see that in the exercise books and the workbooks of children, very little writing was happening, because if you are not writing in your exercise book or in a workbook as a learner, essentially, you must question how much time on task is spent by those learners really learning, engaging with the subjects that they're being taught in the classroom. And as you can see in this graph, the picture is really not great. And time on task in a lot of schools, particularly, schools in the rural areas and the townships, falls off the cliff, particularly in the whole month that leads up to the assessment. So there's hardly any teaching going on in the classroom. And this, ladies and gentlemen, robs our children the ability to really be put in a position where we're preparing them for success in life. So it is something that we as teachers and as leaders must take, very seriously in terms of the role that we play. So it goes beyond making sure that you are acting with integrity and ethics, because you are communicating, because you are handling the finances of the school with integrity, you're communicating with parents openly and fairly, but it goes to the heart of whether we're putting our learners at the center of what we're doing as educators. So yes, as a country, as I conclude, we've had a number of reforms that are seeking to improve the quality of education of our system. But the question that we need to ask ourselves as leaders is that, have all these reforms and changes in curriculum in ways that, the government is trying to improve our system, the question is, what goes on at schools? There are many great leaders in our public education system, particularly. We see a number of schools where you visit the school with very limited resources that are doing great things. But it is important for us as leaders to recognize that we have a very, very important role to play in giving hope to our young people, in setting them up for success in life. And some of the issues, such as the crisis that we're facing in mathematics, such as the time on task on learning every day, is something that we must take seriously, because if we don't, we will continue to fail our young people and contribute to the growing statistics of young people who are unemployed, who do not have jobs, who are loitering the streets, who have no hope. I thank you.
Wow, Prof. Doc, I'm actually elevating you to Prof, but you might as well be, because you have so many honorary qualifications. We would never say that you are apart from us. You can see by the number of hearts and the number of claps. And in the chat also, your conversation has been deeply, deeply appreciated. And I think because you bring into the consciousness the actual purpose of leadership, that is from a moral and integrity point of view, an act of service. And the fact that when you're a leader, it's not about your position, it's not about your power over others. And I love that you brought in the elements of the dark side of power, because we often wonder, we have these amazing leaders, and then what happens to them when they get into those positions where they can make a difference? And why is it that they're tempted, to take us down the wrong path? And then I think your focus on mathematics education also brings another moral element in here. Is it not morally incorrect that we do not pay attention to the fact that we have a mathematics crisis and that it is a gateway topic and a gateway proficiency and skill that our learners are going to need to be able to participate not only in their further schooling, but in the work of the future? Dr. Sizwe, this has been an amazing, amazing keynote. You really opened the conference with such a lot of food for thought. I just want to go into the chat and just basically pick up one or two questions from our audience. So Monty gives us a really good definition. Monty Sekukuni gives us a really good definition of ethical leadership when what I read here says, to lead ethically and with integrity means exercising leadership in a way that aligns with moral principles, fairness, transparency, and consistency between words and action. So the question around the centers on, if that is the definition of what it means to lead ethically, then why is it that we have this kind of leadership, particularly in South Africa, where people talk a lot, but are very limited in how they act? And sometimes you'll find that they talk about moral behavior and accountability, but then they themselves become accused of acting in a way that's immoral. What do you think is the tension? What happens in that space of leadership, given that you yourself has also probably been in many positions where your call has had to be to take the moral high road, and being pressured to do things that you may not necessarily be willing. So what is the tension there? What happens to people when they speak a lot about accountability, but then their actions show us that they have chosen the wrong direction? What happens there? What is the tension?
Yeah, I just want to start off by saying, obviously, I think a couple of things. One, we can't generalize because there are many great leaders, especially in our education system. But the tone is often set at the top. And I do think that we live in a world, this is not a South African phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. We see what is happening with all the wars that are taking place in the world. We see what's happening with leadership in different parts of the world, including South Africa, leaders who are self-serving, who are all about themselves. Leaders who have forgotten that for you to lead, you must have people that are following you, where money plays a huge role in terms of how people lead and how they even buy people to follow them, because, money has become such an important, issue, particularly in a capitalist society. So the point I'm making is the whole world is facing this dilemma. You need to look at countries in Americas, North and South America, in Europe, in Asia. We seem to be facing at this particular moment a leadership crisis in a number of areas. And South Africa is no exception. South Africa is no exception. And in our context, the fact that we have come to live in a world where there are no consequences for unethical behavior, for even criminal behavior for that matter, says to people, a lot of people who may be tempted, it's worth taking a chance, it's worth risking stealing money from the poor particularly, because there will be no consequences for themselves. So that has become a really big issue in our country. We've had a lot of these commissions as an example, but as citizens, we're yet to see people in orange clothes in prison. And all of this says to many people, it's okay to steal money. It's okay to live unethically. It's okay. You know, when you look at, for instance, things that are being reported to the health ombudsman in our country, where people are stealing from the little amounts that are meant for patients to large sums, millions or hundreds of millions of rands that are meant particularly for poor patients in our system, and they get away with it. Just tells you that we have a moral compass in our society that is challenged, that is broken very often. But in spite of that, we still have many, many great leaders out there.
Absolutely agree with you. And I think that the idea of accountability is a big one for our country, because we, like you rightly say, have seen so many people caught red-handed or with a hand in the cookie jar, as you might say. But then at the end, nothing really happens. And that's what gives people the kind of open access to get tempted to do these things, because they know that there aren't very many consequences. But your keynote address also focused on the question of our learners, and you spoke almost, with a heartfelt concern, and you spoke about, that the learners are at the soul of leadership, and that everything that an education leader does has to be with the learner in mind. Mia has a question in here speaking about this malaise that we also experience in our country, where our schools cannot just be remiss in thinking that their mandate is only to get our kids through a matric exam. But they also have to pay attention to this idea of, we have a lot of learners who are sitting with a past matric exam, but they are limited by choices. Part of it is linked to the quality of education. So Mia is asking, what can we do at schools where the quality of education provided also takes into account those learners who may not necessarily have the option of higher education or continuation beyond matric, in any formal sense? I know that the stream curriculum was piloted and is underway, but that will still take a bit of time to, sort of get underground, and it won't be available for everybody. So what can schools and leaders at schools do to ensure that our learners are not only prepared for the matric exam, but that they're also given the kind of life skills that are needed to be able to develop themselves entrepreneurially or otherwise outside of school? So if you have any thoughts on that as a moral responsibility.
Yeah, this is one area where lifelong learning for leaders and educators becomes really important. I was trained as a school teacher in 2021 and 2022. And I must say, just starting with how teachers are prepared in South Africa. As I said earlier, it's important as a teacher and educator to impart skills and competencies that you do not have yourself. So there's a problem, I think, in our country when it comes to how we, as institutions that prepare teachers, are doing so. But having said all of that, we can't just blame the system that prepares teachers. That's why I touched on the issue of continuing learning and lifelong learning for educators, because it is important that we recognize that we live in a world that is fast changing. It is important to recognize that we ourselves as educators need to educate ourselves around what is it that we need to do? How do we change pedagogies in the classroom to be able to impart these skills to young people? I'll give an example. There are a number of schools now that have adopted inquiry-based education, that have adopted problem-based learning or project-based learning of their own accord. They use exactly the same CAPS curriculum. They use exactly the same ATPs, the annual teaching plans that are given by the department, but they're able to adapt those in the manner that they teach in the classroom for the benefit of their learners. So there's nothing in the Schools Act or in the Bella Act or even in some of the rules and the guidelines that are provided by provinces, districts, and circuits to schools that stop schools from being creative. I know that you have subject advisors and so on who come to check at schools where, you know, the schools are in terms of their learning and teaching. But visionary leaders are able to inspire, are able to get all the educators in a school to think differently, to reflect about the job that they are doing in the classroom. And that's what I would say. Besides the issues of what the Department of Basic Education is trying to do through three-stream curriculum and curriculum strengthening and all of this.
That is a beautiful answer, and I think we all take home this idea of repurposing the curriculum is not a preventative thing. One can actually do great things with that, as well as instilling lifelong learning. Dr. Sizwe, one last question, all the way from Tanzania, by Dr. Kezia Mkhizu, who asks, how can leadership ethics enhance the world of AI integration in education?
Well, the first thing is to embrace artificial intelligence. I know there are certain countries that are even banning the use of AI in the classroom. But, you know, artificial intelligence is with us, whether we like it or not. And young people, especially because they are tech savvy, if they have devices and they have smartphones, they're going to use you know, AI very often for plagiarizing, for copying, for cheating, which is why it's important for us as educators to educate ourselves, even if the system says, well, you know, maybe you shouldn't be using AI. It is important for us as educators to educate ourselves around AI. AI is really turning learning and teaching in the classroom, as well as assessments, on its head. You see many cases where young people, you know, are given homework, they go home, they use AI to copy, to plagiarize. We see many cases where if we are using past exam papers as a way to teach, as a way to prepare learners for assessments, you know, young people are able to use prompts and they load past exam papers in AI platforms. There are many different AI, not just ChatGPT. There are many out there and new ones that are coming out every day. So, and what they do, they load the papers and prompt, you know, AI systems, and they get the answers. So AI poses a major risk in terms of cognitive development of our young people, unless we as teachers educate ourselves and change the way that we teach and assess. You know, I can tell you now, like for instance, in our schools, we've changed our assessments and our ways of teaching altogether. If I just take mathematics, you give young people an answer and they must work backwards. You give them the opportunities to create, to question, to solve problems, to speak, to communicate. And that way you can see whether deep learning is taking place or not. So we cannot ignore AI.
Thank you very much for an amazing, amazing conversation. And we look forward to our audience engaging with you in the Q&A, Dr. Kasana. And again, we really, really value the time that you took to give us your insights. Thank you so very much. Colleagues, we want to put up the Mentimeter answers. Mitesh, I don't know if you just want to just put up the screen just to show us what people thought about in terms of what does it mean to lead with integrity. And I hand over now to my colleague, Dr. Mkhize, to continue with the facilitation. Over to you, Dr. Mkhize.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yasin, for starting up this conversation. Dear friends and colleagues, we have a lineup of 3 presentations where the presenters are going to share their inputs and echo what Dr. Sizwe spoke about regarding our conference theme, which is Leading with Integrity, reimagining ethical education leadership for transformative learning. So they will each be given 20 minutes to do their presentation. And then after that presentation, after all have presented, we have a question and answer session where it will be open for all of us in this venue to ask questions. And we are also encouraging you to share your questions via on the chat. You can write your questions there as well. It will help our speakers as I introduce the first speaker, who is Ms. Cynthia Schoeman. Ms. Schoeman is a founder and managing director of Ethics Monitoring and Management Services. She chairs the Ethics Practitioners Association and serves on various ethics committees. Cynthia has written books and guides on workplace ethics and governance. She lectures at top business schools and speaks at conferences. She holds a BA, MBA, Master of Philosophy in Applied Ethics, and that she got it cum laude. There's a lot to say about her, but I will give her the platform to share her presentation. Over to you, Mrs. Schoeman.
Thank you very much. Can I confirm that you have a clear picture of my first slide?
Yes, we do have a clear picture.
Yeah, I would put my camera on, but in fact it is on now. Good, it wasn't allowed a
Yes,
minute ago,
we
so
can
now
see
you've
you.
got a real person and slides. What a bonus.
Great.
So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this wonderful conference. I think that this topic flows so very nicely from the previous focus, and here, as you can see, it's really drilling down into that crucial issue of being not simply an ethical leader, but being an effective ethical leader. And so now I'm not sure why this is not working. Out there it's working. And here again, let me share my underpinning thoughts, if you want, before I share a few thoughts on this topic with you. That really, I think we would all agree that if we're looking at ethical leadership and we're combining that with education, what we're looking at, as I would argue, is what should be a wonderful foundation for the future. And two thoughts here, that of course ethical leadership is essential for building any ethical institution, be that educational or any other for that matter, and of course it's essential for building ethical societies. And I also stress another underpinning thought here, that when we're looking at education at its best, of course, should be leadership education. And we should never lose sight of the fact that the ethics of our educational institutions, of course, influences, I say future leaders, and I'd like to believe that that is so, but it influences the people in those institutions, be they learners, teachers, parents, and the like. So just underpinning thoughts. But a question I'd like to start with, and I appreciate this is not online, so I'll share with you the normal responses I get, is that before we drill down to look at ethical leadership, I think we need to just say, what are the key drivers of ethical conduct? So within our schools, within our country, for goodness sake, I'm sure we would all agree that we all would like ethical conduct, ethics and ethical conduct. But the question here is, okay, within our institutions, within our organizations, what levers, what factors do you have that can help you influence conduct such that it's ethical? Now, the one that always comes up first is this one. that within our organizations, clearly, obviously within our schools, yes, of course, legislation applies, but we would have rules, regulations, policies, codes of conduct. You get the picture. What else do we have? And sometimes here, I must tell you, when I'm facilitating in person, these answers are sometimes really slow. And I'm thinking, actually, this is basics. We should have this literally at our fingertips. Of course, the other key driver are values. And this is quite a different mechanism. I'm not going to spell out the obvious, but quite a different mechanism. And I continue in my very long experience now of speaking about ethics. Do you know that the one that comes out last is this? And you'd think it'd come out first. But in fact, it almost always, laws, rules, regulations, all those rule-based mechanisms always comes out first. But if we look at it, those are the factors that you have at your disposal to work with in your context to influence conduct such as ethical. What I think is quite informative is to look at the question and say, which driver do you think is used the most? And which one is the most effective? And here again, the answer, I think, to the first question is very clear. The one that is used the most are the whole area of rule-based mechanisms, far and away used the most. But the more interesting question, of course, is out of these drivers, remember the goal here is to really achieve ethical conduct. What's the most effective driver? Leadership by a margin. And I mean, there's been very sound academic research on that. It's not simply, the world according to Cynthia, so to speak, that leadership is far and away the most important factor. And so here, let me make the obvious point that who the leader is makes a huge difference. Let me point out very clearly before someone walks away and says, oh my goodness, she put up a picture of the Guptas and Marcus Jooste. Let me be clear, there's a big red line in the middle of that. The one side is great, the other side is very definitely not. And the point is really being stressed that who the leader is and what their ethics are makes a huge difference. So the focus then of the short bit of time I'm sharing with you is what is necessary to be an effective ethical leader, not simply ethical, but an effective one. And here I want to share, you can see I've headed it competency model. Let me tell you, if you knew me well, you'd know I'm not a competency model kind of person. But I really developed this because I found in so many conversations in organizations that leaders were very focused on the people, the others needing ethics training, but were completely ignoring of their need. Now, this has been written in an organizational, in a workplace context, but of course it applies absolutely to educational institutions as well. So to be a really effective ethical leader, by the way, you need to have a sound knowledge of ethics. I say workplace ethics, the school is also a workplace. You need to understand it. And let me add the obvious. Ethics is actually a complex subject. It's got, honestly, a great depth that we don't always apply our minds to. This is the really big one. And I've worded it very carefully. That you need to, as an ethical leader, not simply be a good role model. I'm adding extra words there. A conscious role model, a consistent role model, and who consciously makes ethics visible to others. Of course, you need to develop ethical followers, and you need to build an ethical culture in your organization. And remember, there's an external dimension to that as well, that within the organization, your school, as any other organization, has stakeholders, both internal and external. Having an ethical brand and an ethical reputation is, of course, as invaluable to you as any other organization. And sadly, that is so well illustrated by the opposite. When we hear of a scandal in a school, we can understand what the absence of that point does and how dreadful it can be. So that's the first point I want to make. I want to stress the issue here, just for a moment, about the leader as a role model. Now, I appreciate that, humor is sometimes different for different people, but I think this one's quite self-explanatory. Now, if you're looking at that picture, on the left-hand side of your screen, underneath the bonnet of the car, there's a little touch of blonde there. And I'm thinking that that's the top of the wife's head. So why I use this as a role model is that if we look at the scene, the car's clearly landed up in the water. But what did he prioritize? Well, the golf clubs. So, I mean, the wife is second, maybe she, I'm not even going to go further down that path, but the wife was not first. And I use this simple little cartoon to say, can we remember that what we prioritize, that how we behave as a role model is visible to everyone all the time. And by the way, that's what makes leadership so very tough, that actually we are visible role models and people can interpret our actions extremely easily. But moving on from that, I want to focus on two particular areas. I think that these are core areas of understanding in terms of being an ethical leader. And these are also two areas that I think are often neglected, sometimes not even recognized. So the first one, I'd like to start with, again, you can see I like cartoons. I like cartoons because I think in a few words, you can capture such an enormous amount of detail. So the statement I'm making here is whether it's your employees, your teachers, whether it's your students, your scholars, your learners, the parents who are part of your stakeholders, can we be clear that your people already know what's right or wrong? And I want you to really pause on that. Let me use a personal example. My youngest grandson is 5. And I promise you, he already knows what's right or wrong. This is not a big mystery. The catch is that we tend to not think beyond that. So we don't have time clearly to discuss this. But the question I would always pose, for example, if you wanted to use this in a discussion in your school, the question I would typically pose is, given the statement that your people already know what's right or wrong, what's the key implication of that? And here, can you see that where we should start is that your people already have the knowledge of what's right or wrong. But here's the first important focus area I want to share with you. And I speak of ethics regularly as what I call, as you can see, a knowing-doing gap. The graphic is absolutely intended. Can we be clear that the knowledge of what's right or wrong almost always exists? The small exception we can carve out are areas where we have real ethical dilemmas, but that's a carve out. Whether, it's the taxi driver stopping at the red traffic light, does she know they should stop? Yeah, of course. Does it mean that they will stop? Ah, well, now that's a different story. And now you can see where I'm going. That the recognition that people in the vast majority of cases already know what's right or wrong. Can we not fall into the trap of assuming that knowledge is going to turn into action? Knowing what's right or wrong does not mean that my 5-year-old grandson doesn't do the wrong thing. Not at all. But the challenge we face as leaders is that if we're wanting to influence the action, the doing part of it, of course, knowledge is important, but it's not the only factor. Let me add as an aside that where we look at all sorts of examples in our country and elsewhere of unethical conduct, it is extremely rare that that unethical conduct happened because of an absence of knowledge. It happened for another reason, and that's this. It happened because, yeah, of course, the person knows they should stop at the red traffic light or they shouldn't pinch their mate's cell phone, whatever. Of course, they knew that. They simply made another choice. Good, bad, right, wrong. And we so regularly forget this very important middle step, that the knowledge does not translate into doing. It is that choice that sits in the middle. So when as leaders we're looking at trying to shape ethical behavior, trying to shape behavior such that it's more ethical, can we be very clear that we have to look at this dimension of choice, and mostly it is really quite neglected, if not entirely neglected. The second point I'd like to make that I also think is somewhat neglected and is a really important point in terms of ethical leadership. As you can see, I'm speaking about the importance of a dual approach to ethics. I want to share a quick analogy before I make this point. And the analogy I want to share is this, that if we were looking at a profit-based organization, and I said to you, what are the two big things you can do to improve profit in this organization? I absolutely bet you could all tell me in a nanosecond that, Cynthia, of course you want to improve profit, you can cut costs, and of course you can increase revenue, increase sales, okay? Those are the two things. But you'd also quickly say to me, you know, they're very different things, but they would both impact profitability. Now, if we take that analogy into ethics and we say, what about a dual approach to ethics? What do we mean in that regard? And can you see that, of course, looking at ethics warrants and demands a focus on minimizing unethical conduct? And of course, you know, there should be consequences. I'm not going to go down that path. Of course, it warrants that. But the challenge is, that's often where we stop with ethics. The point I want to share with you, and again, think back to that very interesting little profitability analogy, that yes, of course you can cut costs, but increasing revenue would be a much better path to improving profitability. Now, I want you to think about this here. The dual focus is, yes, of course, we need to minimize unethical conduct. But my question is always, what are we doing to improve ethics and strengthen values? And let me be very clear, the answer shouldn't be nothing. And I think an important point that as ethical leaders we should be taking into account. I'm echoing my previous speaker's nice point that he touched on about the dark side of power. And I'm also looking at it here that leaders by definition have power and influence. And let's recognize that in your environment, lots of people qualify as leaders. I'm not simply looking at one school principal. Leadership is exerted at all sorts of levels. And here, are we using that power and influence ethically, or are we abusing it? Now, I include an unnecessarily long quote from a recent copy of The Economist. And, you know, I appreciate and I acknowledge that, you know, there might be some of you who support Donald Trump, but I think this is a fairly factual statement here that, I mean, Donald Trump unquestionably exerts extraordinary power and influence. But the behaviors that are being spelt out here, I will leave you to your decision. In my view, this really is an abuse of power. Now, you can look at it and say, Cynthia, by the way, we're in a school. I'm using this example, I've got one more. Because can you see that leadership, power, and influence, we are also affected by our context, internationally and locally. And I think locally, for example, public officials who enrich themselves, of course, I mean unethically, whether that is procurement or the like, this is really a lesson that all of us are exposed to. And the challenge we face is almost that situation of, but everyone's doing it. Now, of course, that's an exaggeration, but can we not ignore that it's not simply our principals and our teachers, but also our parents and our pupils increasingly who are impacted by what's going on in the environment around them. And where we are looking at abuse of power, let's be clear, this is visible. Last couple of thoughts in terms of, I'm conscious of timing, in terms of looking at the ethical use of empower. I would make 3 points here. I think the first one, as you can see, is so very pertinent to our country, that of course we should empower to lead, to empower and uplift others. Of course we should. I want to comment just briefly on the other 2 points before I conclude. Again, I happen to think a wonderful cartoon. For a fair selection, everyone has to take the same exam. If we ended there, it'd be perfect. Please climb that tree. Now, let me be clear, my money's not on the goldfish. And what I think this very cute little cartoon illustrates for us is that second point I'm making, that the decisions as leaders, we're making the majority of the decisions in our organizations. Of course, they need to be fair, and they need to be made on a sound basis. The third point I'd like to make in terms of the ethical use of power is that I speak of ethical boundaries, and I speak of ethical boundaries as being inclusive or exclusive. And by exclusive, let me be clear, I don't mean Gucci. What I'm talking about here is, do we include our stakeholders within our ethical boundaries, or are we exclusionary? And of course, this is relative to all the stakeholders. The issue here is that in our society, stakeholder inclusivity is a really big deal. And I share this comment with you to really stress not only the importance of following an inclusive approach, of taking into account the people who are stakeholders and their concerns and their expectations. But I think this is such an extraordinarily powerful quote. And again, I think it is so pertinent for our society for reasons of our history, which our previous speaker spoke to. So yes, we do need to absolutely intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include. And so that brings me to the conclusion around saying, what is the optimal outcome of ethical leadership? And of course, there's a huge number of answers, and I'm not saying there's one particular right one, but I am, for the purposes of this talk, going to choose one. And can you see that when we're looking at really effective ethical leadership, I would tell you the trust, that achieving trust among all stakeholders is an extraordinarily valuable outcome. And I extract from that the point that as leaders, can we be clear, a core role is to build, protect, and preserve that trust. So with that, can I say thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for this powerful presentation. You bring to us the issue of power and choice. And the question that you asked and the answer to that is that we should be doing nothing because all of us should be doing what is right before we do any other thing. So that's powerful. I hope you'll still be in here to take the round of questions. Do you want to do it now and leave, or we can
I'm
have
afraid
to speakers?
I'd prefer to do it now if that's possible for you.
Colleagues and friends, here is Ms. Schoeman. A powerful presentation. What are your thoughts about the presentation? Any take, any question for her? Colleagues will also help me with the chat if there are questions there as well. Any hands, and unmute yourself.
Bongani, I think Mamsi's comment in the chat is really important, and maybe Cynthia could respond to this. She says, in my experience, positional power and the greed to control overshadows moral obligation to do the right thing. I think she's talking about your knowing doing gap there, Cynthia. So I don't know if you want to perhaps make a comment on this idea of this greed to control.
I think it is sadly a very real factor, not only, of course, in our society, but I think it's a very real factor. And I think it's not only about the greed to control. It's about greed in all sorts of ways. The self-enrichment. I mean, if we look at the people who have been, accused of honestly siphoning off not merely millions, billions, they're not short of money. This is pure greed. And so I think sadly there are countless examples in our society and beyond of leaders who have utilized their power for absolutely indecent, unethical, illegal self-gain. Now, the challenge of that is that this is visible for us to see. That and don't think our learners don't understand this, that when you're on the, Instagram feed and someone's got all the bling and the designer handbags and the best cars, the challenge this poses is looking at it and saying, not simply that everyone's doing it, but also saying, why am I the only idiot who's being honest here? And so can you see that the challenge when we look at leadership role models is that, of course, we would wish for an ethical role model like Thuli Madonsela. But can we recognize that the unethical role models who are, covered in bling and fancy cars and the like are equally as powerful? Their influence can even be more powerful. And so when we're dealing with building ethical conduct, it's not simply promoting ethics. It's also speaking to those very, very visible negative role models in our society.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for that. We'll take Neo. You'll be the last to ask question for this round, but we still have a section where we'll have all of you asking questions. Neo? You are unmuted. If you can unmute yourself, Neo.
Hi, Doctor.
Hello.
Forgive me, I couldn't unmute myself.
Your network is not good. We can't hear you very well.
Yeah. My surrounding is very bad, Doctor. I'll write in the chat, it's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we say thank you very much, Cynthia. Of course, because of time, we'll have a section where I think there are more people who would be posing some questions around the issue that you made of knowledge and the doing. That the gap between the knowledge and doing. We know things. We know things that are right and wrong. But why are we not doing the right things? It's a matter of choice. Very powerful.
Good. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being part of this.
Great. Thank you very much. And as we proceed with our lineup, we have Dr. Sibonelo Blose, who's going to present with Max Baloyi. Dr. Sibonelo Blose is a senior lecturer at the University of Pretoria. He started teaching in 2007 and became a deputy principal before joining higher education in 2016. His research focuses on school leadership, middle and district leadership, and narrative inquiry. He joined the University of Pretoria in 2022. I will leave to you, Dr. Blose, to introduce Max. Or should I?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Please do introduce Max as well. If you...
Okay, Max Baloyi is going to present with Dr. Blose, and he's a master's student at the University of Pretoria, specializing in education management, law, and policy. He qualified as a teacher in 1994 and was appointed by the Department of Basic Education as a teacher in 1995. In January 2006, he assumed the position of principal at Nkavi Primary School. In 2014, the Department of Basic Education appointed him as a caretaker principal at a school that was newly established. 2 years later, he was officially appointed as a principal of the school, and a position he continues to hold to this day. So please go ahead and share your inputs around the theme for today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mkhize. We'll start with Max. I'm trying to share here and my system is letting me down. I think I'll have to share the entire screen because we want to share once instead of us sharing and exchanging slides. So I would share now, then Max will start. Over to you, Max.
Thank you very much. Greetings to the facilitators and much appreciated to the organizers of this very important conference. Indeed, we focusing on fostering the stakeholders' collaboration, and much will be put on the principal's reflection on that topic. Now, it's very important that one note as introduced that I'm an MEd student at the University of Pretoria, and much appreciated to my supervisor, Dr. Blose. I've been a principal for almost 20 years now. And on the road of my management, I became the chairperson of the Second Management Committee. And it's been 9 years now. It's the committee that assists the second manager in terms of managing the second. And that will give you the view in terms of not focusing at your own school, but to get a glimpse on what's happening in other schools around the second. And at the same time, I've served for around 26 years as a union leader at the level of the site, your branch, and currently at the regional level. And in most cases, and one of the responsibility given to me is to represent teachers in the consequence management hearings. And let me indicate, colleagues, that our focus will be community engagement, indigenous knowledge, and participatory leadership, focusing on stakeholders collaboration. Indeed, as I've indicated, it will be my reflection as a school manager, as a background that will assist each and everyone to understand where one comes from. Probably let me have a hint on the role identity in leadership, because that will give a base on what I'm talking of. Now, let me indicate that every leader has a multiple role that need to be balanced. In my personal experience, I'm a school principal and I'm a unionist, and each and every role got its own demands that need to be managed. And but in a process of such roles that is assumed by each and every leader, one develop an identities which are linked to these multiple roles. Now, at any given time, these roles take salience over the other, where the developed identity is aligned to a role which is more considered to be high in terms of hierarchy. This presentation I'm going to make this afternoon, it's based on my principalship identity. Let me share with you the importance of stakeholders' collaboration. Probably it's very important to indicate that I've read and I've seen great leaders in the world who were put into the leadership position by their intelligence and their knowledge and their ability to articulate issues. But the element of collaborative leadership let them down because it couldn't sustain them in that particular leadership role that they assumed. That's why it's very important that if one is a leader, should be able to embrace collaborative leadership, where one takes on board, in terms of the school, your parents' community, your parents themselves, community leaders, business community, religious leaders, and traditional leaders, and other stakeholders which are interested in the education of learner. Now, it's very important in the sense that this collaboration may lead to the creation of very strong learner support systems, which may lead to a better learner performance. Part of your business and other interested stakeholders may be able to source whatever programs at the level of the school. Now, again, it's able to build a stronger relationship between the school and the community, which will enhance community and social responsibility. Now, it will even create a safe environment for teachers, learners, and everybody within the school vicinity. Ownership will create school safety. Now, at the same time, taking on board your traditional leaders will assist in terms of your school programs, which will become culturally relevant if one understands the role of traditional leaders in the communities. And your programs will be able to respond to the needs of such communities. And now, these taking on board all stakeholders in your leadership as a principal will better your decisions, make your decisions relevant, and whatever decisions that you take or arrived at will be supported by everybody. Now, as I've indicated before, I'm going to basically speak on the lived experience as a principal of the school. And it will be very important to share with everybody my experience in terms of collaborating with stakeholders. And if one manager, one principal want to ensure a collaborative leadership at the level of the school, first is to make sure that you have a functional SGB. And each and every member at the level of the SGB must understand his or her delegated responsibility. And from that point, together with your SGB, you'll be able to create and establish a communication channels towards each and every piece of your stakeholder circle. And one very important element is the continuous face parents meetings, because that's very important. Bringing the parents closer to the school, making them understand what is happening, making them move with you in terms of the performance of your learners. Now, it is very important to include your stakeholders in the very important calendar events of your school. Be your sport day, your culture day, even your fun work day. And that will assist them in terms of understanding what is happening within the school. And automatically that will make them part of your school. Now, one very important element is the stakeholders' performance report meetings, where as the manager, where as a team of professional managers at the level of the school, that's your SMT, will be able to outline the successes and challenges of the school. And in that stakeholders meeting, it is your chance to be able to outline what the school needs in terms of getting assistance and how the stakeholders will assist your school and your learners, including the teachers, and responding in terms of attending the meetings and events of the community, including just a small portion, which is funerals, very important. Personally, as a school principal, I have witnessed benefits of a collaborative leadership. I've seen the community developing a sense of ownership to the school. Now they feel this school belongs to us. You touch the school, you touch us. Now, the community members and leaders will work towards ensuring security of the school. Now, if they own or develop ownership of the school, they will make sure that the school is safe, because you don't always get security in your school. This school are settled and established within the communities. And it's a responsibility of everybody, including this community member, an individual member of the community, to make sure that the school is safe. And I've seen business community feeling obliged to invest the resources in the education of the learners. Now, at the same time, these particular individual community members giving out their skills and talents in a service of the school.
I take it you are
Thank you
done.
very much. I think as indicated by the facilitator, that was a collaborative presentation with Dr. Bloss, and I can quickly hand over to him to continue.
Thank you so much, Max, and good afternoon to everybody. It is a great pleasure to be part of this online conference. I see that we are all in a space labeled online, where we can see our faces and names, but cannot see ourselves and one another physically. It is really interesting, and this is the power of technology. I just want to pick up and extend on what Max has presented. Max has given us a very interesting, reflection as a school principal in terms of how, he is fostering stakeholder collaboration in his school. And I just want to extend this and zoom into one of the works that I've done recently on the role of traditional leadership in enhancing school community partnership, because this is about collaboration. It is about, using this power. And I want to perhaps borrow from the first presenter, Dr. Nxasane, who was very clear in terms of leadership as a positional power. And unfortunately, in the space of education, people are appointed to management positions. And because they are managers, they have got to lead the school, because leadership is an aspect within management. So then they've got this power, which sometimes is not used, as we would appreciate. So as I was thinking here, I was making an example, a very funny example, that a gun is given to person who is mentally disturbed. If you give a gun to a person who is mentally disturbed, he's going to shoot everyone and everyone would die. But if you give a gun to a person who knows how to use it and who understands the value of the gun, probably they would use it well. So with regard to the power now that is held by our leaders in schools, some of them, they use the power well. And that's what Dr. Nxasane indicated, that we've got good youth leaders who know how to lead the schools, not even in schools, in other, spaces, people who are using the power that they are entrusted with, very well. So some, as Max was saying, some even extend the power and share the power with other people, which is also a good thing, that you don't keep it and hold onto this power alone, but you also share with it. And that is how collaboration, play out. But there is the black side of power. I think that's what Dr. Nxasane said, where people, are exploiting and taking advantage of the power that they have, unfortunately. So this is the book chapter that I recently authored under the book edited by Professor Bengu. It is looking at the role of traditional leadership, in enhancing school community partnership. And I feel that it is speaking to the theme 3 of today's conference, because it is paying attention to collaboration. And we do need to ensure that we embrace collaboration in our schools, and we promote this collaboration amongst stakeholders, so that we benefit from multiple skills instead of relying on the skill or the charisma of one leader. In this book chapter, I used the concept of servant leadership, and Greenleaf has a very interesting definition of what is a servant leader, and he explains a servant leader is a person who is a servant first before they become a leader. And he's making a distinction that if you are not a servant leader, then you, according to Greenleaf, then you are not a leader, because what he explains as a non-servant, it is a person that is driven by their own desires, who are attracted to maybe certain material things. And that's what perhaps we see in our school, people who are attracted by material things, people who just want power that they can, exploit people. And then we then regard those people as leaders, yet in actual fact, they are not leaders. In this chapter, there are 3 lessons that I pulled out in terms of the case study that was explored in terms of how the traditional leadership assisted the school. Because on the one hand, in rural spaces, we've got traditional leaders, and their role in terms of working with school is not clear, and perhaps it is not in their job description, if I may put it like that, to work with school or support school. Then we've got schools, on the other hand, which are led by the school management team and overseen by the school governing body. And the traditional leader cannot also impose itself in the school governing body. So then it becomes unclear in terms of how do these structures work together, because in rural context, these structures do work together. And what came out from this study is that there was a cooperation in controlling learner behavior. It appeared that both the traditional leaders and the schools cooperated in controlling learner behavior and ensured that learners behaved well and that teaching and learning was not, affected during the course of the school. So, and also there was this bolstering of school resources. So it appeared in this case study, these traditional leaders could, get resources and support the school in terms of acquiring certain important resources to an extent that the traditional leaders can even, construct buildings in school with the resources that they can, get from different sources. So this relationship between the school and traditional leaders appear to have benefit and appear to be healthy, and I'll speak to that a bit later. Another thing that also came out is embracing school and their function. So there was this, observation that the traditional leaders embraced the schools and their function. The school was theirs. Of course, the schools are theirs because the schools are public schools in most cases, and rural schools, they are public schools, so they are theirs. But from the traditional leadership point of view, they, embrace the schools as theirs, that will do whatever it takes to support our school and ensure that our schools thrive. Some of the takeaways that I present in this chapter is that the findings show that there is a harmonious relationship between schools and traditional leaders in rural communities. This relationship is harmonious. They are able to work together and collaborate in various, activities. So traditional leaders offer their support in two ways. This was my observation. It is out of their own will, also on an invitation. So these both, approaches were playing out. It would be that maybe the traditional leaders would, out of their own will, support the school, or the school will invite them to support them on certain, issues like learner behavior and misconduct and so on. So in this harmonious relationship observed between these two structures, or this, it is this relationship is suggestive of a partnership that is organically generated. So I'm saying this carefully, that it is organically generated because there is nothing binding either party to collaborate with the other, but out of their own will, both parties feel that they've got to recognize one another. The schools are recognizing the traditional leadership, and the traditional leadership is recognizing school, and they are meeting halfway to support the education of learners. And I argue that this organically generated partnership emerges from the role overlap between the schools and traditional leaders. And this overlap is displayed in the two subsequent bullet, that on the one hand, the role of the school is to provide education to children. On the other hand, the traditional leaders possess some form of authority over communities, including school-going children, the future of their community, and they have an interest in the children's education. So the traditional leaders also have an interest in the education of their children, because these children are the future of the community. So because there is overlap in terms of their interest, that is why these stakeholders organically find a way of collaborating. So there is a myriad of challenges in rural school context that compromise school-based leaders attempt to run their schools effectively. These include, amongst many, the lack of resources, inadequate parental support for children's learning, limited funding, underqualified educators, multi-grade teaching, poverty, and so on. And all these challenges make the work of school leaders, complex. And the support of traditional leadership therefore becomes important, because in this study, I could see that the traditional leadership were beginning to assist the school leaders in mitigating some of these challenges. So we want to argue that the collaboration, particularly in rural schools where there are multiple challenges between the schools and traditional leaders, and not only traditional leaders, and any other, structures in the community, is important, because it could help school leaders in fighting the challenges that are existing there. I would like to thank you. That's all we wish to share with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blose and Mr. Baloyi, for your presentations. Indeed, you emphasized the issue of collaboration, collaborative leadership, which empowers all the other stakeholders to take ownership of what is happening in the school. Hopefully that ownership is not meant for you as educational leaders to reinforce social injustices by you now using that power that you have the support of the stakeholders to misuse the resources, the small resources that we have in schools, and also not taking and doing the right thing for our learners so that they get the lifelong learning for their success and not for the school. There are many interesting comments on chat and even questions, but as we said, we'll have the discussion after the next presentation. So we'll keep these comments and questions, and then when it's time for question and answer, then we'll bring all of them together and respond to them. I like the comment about that we always see leadership as a ceiling. It's always beautiful, but once there's water stain there, we quickly talk about it. We see the bad thing about it and forget about any other good things that are out there. So meaning that whether you have that partnership and collaborative leadership, but if you are using that not to support the learners, then we will look at that negative part of it. So we'll have the question and answer session after this last presentation by Professor Yassim. Thank you very much for now, but you will come back for those questions. Professor Kate Yassim is an associate professor and education leader with a deep interest in innovation, ethics, and future of learning. She teaches on the Advanced Diploma in School Leadership and Management and the other postgraduate programs at the University of Johannesburg, where she is currently pioneering the use of AI as a reflective tool for leadership development. Her work brings together themes of ethical decision-making, global engagement, and Africanization of education. Kat is passionate about equipping school leaders to navigate complexity, which Dr. Blose is talking about, with integrity, agility, and vision in a rapidly changing world. Over to you, Prof. Kat.
It's me again, Dr. Mkhize, and I'm so proud to be presenting some of this work that I'm doing at the University of Johannesburg. And I specifically wanted to mention the Advanced Diploma in Education, Leadership and Management and the ADSLM. And I hope many of the students are in the room with us today so that they will be a part of the kind of work that we're doing together, which I'll be sharing this afternoon. Please let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can hear and see the screen.
Okay. All right, I think there have been a number of different colleagues and people in the audience who have been really interested in this idea of ethics within the domain of technology. And without any, hesitation, the idea of how is AI in particular, impacting education, and in particular, what is the ethical compass that we require as school leaders? And, ever since the explosion of AI since January, we have been having intense conversation around the role of AI in education. and what does it mean for us? Now, as Dr. Sizwe and others, alluded to in terms of the kind of world in which we are living in right now, and also the kind of world in which our children are inhabiting, the question, and I think the real response right now, is that AI is not coming to our schools. It is actually here already. And I think we are all very vaguely aware of the kind of disruption this particular technology is creating for us. In South Africa, as you can see, we have our first AI robot tutor called Iris. And Iris wasn't designed by some huge technology guru like Microsoft or somebody like that. Iris, you can see the founder of Iris is a young woman who is actually, part of an upcoming group of tech individuals, young individuals that are making a difference. And so here we are with already, what does it mean? Will these robots, will AI take over our classrooms? And of course, what are the conversations around that? Then we head into the continent, into Nigeria, Kenya, other places where the grappling around learning losses during COVID has shown very promising results when it comes to the integration of AI in learning. And the catch up of those learning losses has been found to have been very, very, quick in terms of helping children to catch up the areas that they missed out on when we were under those hard lockdowns. And so Nigeria shows a 31% increase in terms of what AI can do in order to support this catch up. And then the conversations globally where China has now made AI classes mandatory for children as young as 6. And Donald Trump, there, as much as we may not like him for many other things, he's also into the AI conversation. And like China, the US has also decided that they are going to bring AI in education. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we do have certain European countries like Norway, who have chosen to be a little bit more critical about the integration of AI in education. And for many, many countries in Europe, there is now a banning of internet access and technology access a la carte to children, especially in early childhood. So these are the conversations that are happening. And I think Dr. Sizwe also alluded to the fact that there are cognitive areas of brain function that is impacted when AI and other tools are introduced to children too early. So we're grappling in a space where technology is here already. It is in the hand of our children. They seemingly are taking to it like, ducks to water. And basically, it is unavoidable because it's also part of our everyday life in so many ways. So in my presentation today, I just want to grapple with 3 questions, really. The first one being, how is AI transforming schools? How does it shape or reshape the ethical responsibilities of leader? And what does it mean ethically when we think about education leaderships? And then how can leaders themselves use AI to strengthen their self-awareness and decision-making capabilities? And these are 3 questions that I really want to grapple with in terms of what does this technology actually mean within the realms of ethics in the area of school leadership. So our early reactions to AI across the globe, in education in particular, our very early reaction was the state of panic. And you can remember those very early conversations that happened, particularly at universities, but it's likely that the schools also had a bout of it, where there was this fear that learners would start using the tools to write their assignments, to plagiarize, and to kind of develop mechanisms of cheating, and that we need to police AI and its technology use, and that would be something that we would focus on by way of controlling people from using AI rather than actually learning what is the capacity of this AI, teaching ourselves and engaging with it to understand how do we leverage it. And then, of course, there was this whole series of AI bans. Part of it was because there isn't an ethical framework that is acceptable worldwide, and everybody's still grappling around the ethics of AI. So even at University of Johannesburg, apart from the Turnitin, we started using some surveillance tools. And again, with plagiarism and so forth, there are enormously strict punishment that comes with that. And of course, as time is going by, UCT, many other institutions, including UJ and others, are all questioning this idea of surveillance, and rather speaking to what do we do in order to enhance the potential of our students, and how do we support our students in leveraging AI. And there is one example that I'm going to share with you on the ways in which I'm working with it with school leadership. And then, of course, the risk of AI cannot be mitigated, because if it takes sensitive information and starts to use that sensitive information, there isn't a gatekeeper in relation to that. And that's why the POPIA Act. Remember, our learners are also underage. And so what would be the ways in which we feed AI information, and what does that mean for the trust relationship between schools, learners, parents, and the community in general? So there are three main ethical tensions, I would say, that face all of us as educational leaders. And I think Cynthia's concluding remarks really brought this in quite nicely around this question of inclusion. And so one of the tensions that come in with AI is this question of equity versus exclusion. So while AI is quite powerful in closing the gaps through personalization and translation, in other words, it personalizes learning, it can be used as a thinking partner, it is a coach, it can offer so many different roles, but it can also very easily widen the divide if only wealthier schools can afford cutting-edge tools, and particularly in spaces where our learners may lack devices or connectivity. So the question that leaders have to ask is, if we are embracing AI, and by and large, I actually think that lots of people have come to the conclusion that we cannot put our heads into the ground like ostriches. We actually have to face this disruption that is coming. And if we are going to be starting to leverage it, who is included and who is left behind, and how do we create spaces and opportunity for more inclusion? What would those conversations look like? Previously, we were talking about, asynchronous access to learning materials, particularly where learners had a connectivity issue or there was a digital device. Later on, we started looking at cell phone technologies and how that can be leveraged. But now the question around AI is definitely centered around who is included, who is left behind, and how do we, as we develop the different technologies, how do we make it more inclusive? But then again, the other partner topic would be centered around the Africanization of AI. And what does that mean for the continent, but also for South Africa, where there might likely be biases that occur. My students that are in the room know that we have thrashed this out enormously around the kind of bias that AI could bring, and the kind of hallucinations that AI might also offer. The other tension that we have is data privacy and personalization. So AI is a thing that needs to be taught. It's a tool, it's a technology. Something has to teach it. It has to learn from somewhere. And so it thrives on data. It can spot learning difficulties very early. It can track progress at scale, but it also risks surveillance, profiling, and breaches of trust. And if this information goes into the wrong hands, then how is it that they can use this information to do harm? And so leaders, when thinking about this tension, have to think about how to ensure student dignity and how to ensure that our students' rights are protected. The third tension that comes in, and there could be many other tensions, but these are the three that I am exploring with you today, is the idea of efficiency versus humanity. So as much as we are fearful of our learners using AI as technology to cheat, there have been counter arguments from students to say, but then, their teachers are using it in order to prepare lessons, in order to, make their administrative work easier, but also in the very important area of assessment, where it is used perhaps as a grading tool. And so what is the ethics related, to all of that? Now, again, there aren't very many answers to these questions. And we are all experimenting, around the conversations in terms of efficiencies. But the one thing that we all as leaders have to insist, that AI has to support learning. It has to support the teacher in the classroom. It has to support the work of leadership, but it never replaces human care and human judgment. And that's where the fine line of ethics actually come to the fore. Now, these dilemmas remind us of something really important, and that is that how do we navigate the tensions that implore us as leaders when it comes to those three important spaces. So the ethical work of being a leader, what does that mean in the era of YR? Now, earlier conversations, just post-COVID, when we started to look at technology centered around future fit leadership, around complexity leadership, and what do we need to be enabling? How do we get all our teachers on board? How do we support our learners? And the main conversation was centered around how do we integrate technologies in our classroom, particularly in relation to remote learning. But the reality right now is that AI takes the spin a whole lot further. And so in terms of this, we're not only now using AI for enhancing the classroom experience and also supporting learners as they develop their skills, but leaders can also use this as a coaching tool, as a mentoring tool, as a thinking partner, as a reflective space in which they can support their own growth and development. Never before have leaders had something in their hands 24/7 to engage with as a coach, as a mentor, as a thinking partner, as something that is going to support them and assist them, not a la carte, but with some level of human decision-making that they can use, as part of their own growth and development. So leaders, in essence, can use AI as a tool to reflect on their leadership, and this helps to sharpen their self-awareness, because it is a very safe space in which you know that whatever response you are getting has got no judgment, but it also offers you a reflection, a mirror to yourself. AI simulations are also used for decision-making. It has that possibility of developing personalized lifelong learning, particularly for leadership. It is able to grapple with multiple contexts. It allows you to look at different data sources and evidences to be able to make decisions. And it also, at the end, allows you to strategize in a basic way. It also is a coaching tool that you can experiment with, and in that way you can grow as you lead. And what I've seen is that when leaders engage with AI critically and reflectively, they become more conscious, more intentional, and more ethical in their leadership. Now, you'll see in the chat, one of my tutors is here, and one of my PhD students. He used to be a PhD student, but he's now Dr. Lotus Pokupje, and he will tell you he has just marked a number of scripts in which the ethics around the use of AI in leadership has been something that people have grappled with. So what ethical leadership requires is vision. And so the question then becomes, is how do we set a clear purpose for AI in our schools? And so the question that we ask is, why this tool and to what end? Because obviously you want to leverage it. So when you think of school development plans, when you think of the areas of intervention, now these are the spaces in which AI can be instrumental in supporting, how decisions are made and how collaboratively technology is used. But at the same time, it also offers different options in terms of choices that we make. Policies are definitely required, and this is a very big gray area across the world. UNESCO has got an AI policy. South Africa by itself and the DBE and others are grappling, in order to take on what sort of AI policy would be required. Universities are also looking into it. UJ has got its own, effort at doing this. And I belong to a group from the University of Canterbury that's looking at global engagement around what would be the policies that could be used as guardrails. And this is related to data, to plagiarism, and what is the acceptable use. Of course, culture, school culture and education culture is really important, because you have to build a culture and a climate also where AI is questioned and not just consumed. In other words, garbage in, garbage out. So whatever the AI is giving you is not without fault, without flaw. It is going to be something that requires human discernment. Now, although it's very powerful, it is dangerous to just use it in whatever it spits out. One will have to use some kind of discernment to be able to use it effectively. And then, of course, AI is something that also requires courage, because we have to also be willing to say no to tools that undermine fairness and dignity in particular. And this is where the power of it can sometimes be the part where it's very, very powerful, but then what action are you going to take? And you've got to be very discerning around this. And then at the end, in terms of ethical leadership, the use of AI also as a reflective partner can really help our leaders. And I've done this in an engagement with one of my ADE classes, where leaders are able to see blind spots. They're able to test their assumptions, and they're also able to explore their particular reasoning and their judgment on certain things. And so in conclusion, even though what I've given to you is just a tip of the iceberg, as school leaders, your role is not to predict or control every kind of technology that might emerge. Today it's AI, tomorrow it's going to be other versions of AI. And if we have classroom assistants that look like robots, or we have got robots taking certain functions within our schools, then your role is to ensure that that when it arrives, your ethical compass is steady, your vision is clear, and your self-awareness is strong. So in essence, I leave you with 3 imperatives. Discern, understand what AI offers, so engage with it, experiment with it, use it, explore it, engage in conversations around it, but then decide, make certain decisions, not alone, but collaboratively. And remember, student voice is really important here as well, because we never know what is happening in our children's world. We have to engage with them. So we choose with integrity, not convenience. And then, of course, the imperative to defend, protect the humanity of learners and of yourself and of your teachers and of your community above all else. And with that, I really want to thank you for allowing me to share with you some of my exploration with AI and the ethics of it in terms of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yassin, for your presentation. Keeping your video on, and I'll also ask Dr. Bloss and Max to keep their videos on, so that 20 minutes that we have, we can engage and get the audience to share their questions, and also talk about this important topic of ethics and ethical leadership. There are questions that are on the chat. We'll start with them. Mapura Mia had a question around the school principal and the union leader, asking you, how do you balance you balance treating teachers who are not from your union and those that are in your union fairly? And if there's grievance against you, how do you fairly juggle around that? You spoke as a principal and also as a union member. So that question, I think Max will speak to it, and or you, Dr. Blose. Another question on the chat was also speaking to the issue of SGBs. How can one make sure that he has a functional SGB, given that as the leader, you don't influence the SGB election? Again, other SGB members come with their personal ambitions for, if you can respond to that. Another question that speaks to SGBs is how do you control the SGBs from bullying teachers, and also trying to suggest who the deputy principal, or that the deputy principal is capable, and maybe working on chasing out the principal. So those are the questions, Dr. Blose, and for you and Max, if you can briefly share your thoughts, and then we'll take some other questions from the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Mkhize. Unfortunately, I do not see Max. I would have preferred that he responds to the first one in terms of, managing the demands of the two roles. So, but I can say something because Max is doing his master's, and it is titled Managing the Demands of the Two Non-Complementary Leadership Roles. So he is looking at how principals who are holding the principalship position and the leadership role in a union manage the demands, because on the one hand, they represent the head of department, and on the other hand, they represent, the employees. So there are clashes that, occur there. So he is looking at that because he is also puzzled in terms of how these roles could be managed. But it is also acceptable because they are union members, and as members in good standing, they can be elected to take these positions. But on the one hand, they are expected to represent the employer and be accounting officers in schools. So in short, I would say, of course, there will be clashes, and he is looking exactly at that in terms of how could the demands of these non-complementary roles could be managed. Then coming to the issue of school governing bodies, that one is very interesting. I think the first one was about, the bullying that could come from the school governing body, and the other one was about how would you ensure that you've got a strong school governing body, given that, as the principal, you've got no power, in terms of who is elected and whatnot. So maybe let me start with that one, that the principal has no power in terms of who is elected, and the principal shouldn't have power in terms of who is elected to the school governance, because that is the governing body. So in no way would the principal, have power, and he shouldn't, have power, because if they would have power, then they will influence the system, and they've got to account, to this body, school governing body. So if they had power in terms of constituting it, it would be problematic. But it is true that not all school governing bodies are functioning well, and some will complain about a number of things. Some will complain about the levels of literacy in certain school contexts. Some will complain about maybe, commitment, lack of commitment on the end of parents, and allowing principals perhaps to do as they please. So in terms of ensuring that you've got a functional and a strong school governing body, I would suggest that the school principals, after the selection process is completed, they've got to ensure that the capacity building is really playing out, that they are capacitated and they are made to understand what their role is. What is it that is expected from them? I am aware that the Department of Education does organize workshops in terms of capacitating school governing body members. I don't think that is sufficient, because in most cases it would be maybe a few days, if not a one-day workshop. So the continuous, capacitation need to be in place so that, these people understand their role and understand, because their role is very, very, very critical in the education system. If they were playing their role well, we would not see all the unethical practices that we see happening in our school. So that would be my contribution. Then in terms of bullying, again, that is an unacceptable practice if it happens that school governing body members would bully teachers or whoever. That shouldn't be happening. If we all understand our roles, because teachers have got their own role, which is of teaching, the learners, and school governing bodies have their own roles. Although their roles in one way or the other are connected, but their roles are distinct. Again, they can operate, separately, but supporting one another. So there shouldn't be a situation where teachers feel bullied by a school governing body members. That would be my 2-cent contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Max, you can continue.
No, probably to take it from where Dr. Blosser left. Of course, the question is around how do one balance the demands of these two roles. Of course, as Dr. Blosser indicated, this is the study that I'm pursuing currently as I'm doing my master's degree. And of course, it's triggered by my involvement in these two roles. Probably I must cite that this is a very interesting question and a responsibility also. Probably let me bring this phenomenon on board that one of the responsibility that I'm given at the level of the region is to deal with cases. Now, if at times you find yourself in a situation where you have to represent teachers. Now, at the same time, if this teacher probably is from your own school, the Department of Education will expect you to consolidate a report, submit a report, and this report is going to matter most in terms of consequence management in that particular hearing. Now, in my presentation, I spoke of role identity. That as and when a leader assumes a certain role, this leader develops a certain identity. But at the same time, these roles take salience over one another. Now, when I'm at the level of the school, obviously at the top of the hierarchy, the principalship role will take silence over other roles, whether the familiar role, the union role, and so on and so forth. And this will assist in that every time I step out of my car to the office, there's teachers that I'm working should see a principal instead of seeing a union leader. So it's differentiating and these roles and making one role taking a center stage upon the other. It becomes key. But at the same time, the question was that how do one treat those that are not probably union leaders? Maybe to extend even those that are not members of your own union. How then do you treat them? One need to understand that whatever practice that one is dealing with, it's guided by certain legislatives, certain resolutions. But of course, one union got its own constitution and how they operate. But at the same time, one need to be fair. But there are instances which are not guided by any prescript or legislation where one will deal with a recusal. This issue of recusal is not seen on the union operation, because the unions would like to see you protecting members at any given time. But there are political management of certain situations where you say this leader must go and sit in that particular case. to avoid clashes and the point of interest in terms of managing such kind of situations. But this, I must point it out, is a very difficult situation. There are quite, the roles are non-complementary at times. And that's the reason why I have pursued a study to check and explore how other leaders are able to navigate through these challenges and through these two non-complementary roles. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mkhize, you are muted.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Max, for your
Please
response.
also offer Dr. Sizwe also the opportunity, Dr. Mkhize, to also be a part of the question and answer.
Oh yes. Yeah. He was our keynote speaker. Please join this question and answer session. And if you are still here, Cynthia as well. We take the hand from Neo. There was another hand. So let's take Neo first. Please unmute yourself. Thank
Dr.
you.
Mkhize, I am unmuted, okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, apologies for earlier on, my surrounding was quite hectic. Thank you for accommodating me. My concern here is one, in terms of ethics on its own, because remember that ethics is a philosophical concept on its own. And the challenge that was just raised earlier on to say there has to be an establishment of school community partnerships, right? But now, if we are to look at the, what can I say? The attitude of late, né? that people have got, particularly the stakeholders. We know now that schools are no longer safe on their own. We're having violence in the school environment. Not to mention what happens to human trafficking of late about kids. Now, if a school opens up an initiative to have a community, a relationship with itself, how do we standardize the required legal, let's say legislative framework and the legal parameters in relation to the Child Act? Because as a school, we are governed by educational laws, educational acts, and so on. The community, again, is also governed by other legislative frameworks. So I would like to understand, to say, okay, yes, we need to be ethical, but my standard of morals might not match another person's standard of morals. And the background of these learners that we're having as a school member and management team member, the attitude of parents towards understanding to say, within the school, let us try to direct our behavior in terms of the rights, to say, yes, as a learner, you have a right according to the Bella Act. But you having the right, you must know that you cannot suppress another person's right. Okay. And also, earlier on, I wanted to look into the matter of mathematics, because I'm the head of mathematics in high school. To say, I was stricken by the input of Dr. Ngasana to show us, to say, there's actually a decline when I looked at the trend line, the decline in terms of learners who actually choose to do mathematics. But I was interested to look at the research on the attitude of learners towards a particular subject. Number two, I looked at the content and the type of curriculum that we have. And I was very bothered to say, okay, we have a curriculum, we know what we want the output to be. But what does policy actually say? Because if you have a policy that says to you 30% as a minimal, it is acceptable, the way we structure our annual teaching plans, do we really look into the stakeholder of particularly the teacher, the pressure of the teacher within there? And do we look at the...
Thank you very much, Neo. So that we
Thank
give
you,
other...
Dr. Mkhize. Yeah, but I'm just closing here to say, let's look at the attitude when we come to ethics. Thank you so much.
Yes, the speakers will respond. Let's take the hand that is there and request that the questions be short, and so that we can allow more people and get more people into this conversation. We'll take the hand of Lee or Hastings.
Yes, good afternoon, and I just want to appreciate all the presentations so far. Okay, so I'm here also with two caps. I am a principal of a pre-primary school, but I also represent NAPTOSA, and I'm a chairperson of my branch. So yes, I understand the dilemma there, but mine was just on the AI. Thank you, Prof. Yassin, but mine was on AI, especially when it comes to the ECD and the usage of AI in the ECD. We are finding when one uses AI in the ECD, our children are not developing their sensory sort of abilities like what you would want them to. So I understand why countries like Finland and other Eastern countries are a little hesitant to do so. It actually makes sense. And in terms of their developmental stages. Although I know that there's been a lot of research in UCT and other universities in South Africa. I have attended seminars where they have said that they have looked into it. But I think, and that's where we as South Africa need to look at what is it, how is it going to affect us both morally and ethically, because we need to look at it from our perspective. And I think we need to look at it long-term in terms of how's it going to impact our children, because a lot of them don't even come from homes that have necessarily even got running water, yet we are now expecting them to have AI at their fingertips. So for me, there's more of a dilemma there, and yet, yes, we must have transformative learning, but let's also look at what is their other situations as well that they are coming from. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to the mix. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have one or two more hands so that we allow the speakers to take us and respond to the questions up to 4. Dorcas, I see your hand. We'll take it, and then we'll allow the speakers to
Thank you.
respond.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes,
Thank you
Can
so
hear you.
much. Yes. Mine is on the presentation by Dr. Susan Masana. And it is around the issue of time on task as well as curriculum management. You know, this battle, I'm not sure if we are ever going to win it, because if learners are taught and they are not assessed, that like given enough written work, and I think one of the speakers also, and I'm not sure if it was Kat Yassim, about written work in the classroom, which is leading to our learners not performing well, especially in subjects like mathematics, where you have to give written work on daily basis as well as homework. So my question or my point is on, you know, ethics versus accountability of school principals, especially with the huge responsibility that they have in ensuring that there is time on task in the schools, but also curriculum management. And I think this issue of curriculum management in schools, I realize that there's a gap. I am with Kagiso Trust in the Sekhukhune East District, but I've also really been working in education for the longest time in my life. And what you realize is that there seems to be a gap. And perhaps from this kind of conversations, we can then come up with strategies perhaps to assist school leadership in curriculum management, because I think that is at the heartbeat of curriculum delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll now allow the speakers to respond. Anyone can shoot first.
Yeah, I'm happy to go.
A chance.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Sizwe.
Oh, sorry, Prof. Yeah, Sim.
Please go ahead, Dr. Sizwe.
Yes,
Oh,
Prof.
good. Okay. Yeah. So just on the issue of mathematics and the attitude of learners on this subject, I don't think we can ever blame learners if they have an attitude, because if they have an attitude either of, deciding or feeling against mathematics, or even maths anxiety is a big issue amongst learners, because we are told, or learners are told, that mathematics is difficult by teachers, by parents, by officials, and so on. So essentially, if we create a culture, if as a country we create a culture that embraces mathematics, that makes mathematics accessible, that says to all learners, all of them are capable of doing mathematics, the attitude of learners will change accordingly. So I think it is an issue. It has multiple layers in it. There are policy issues around this. As I indicated, the structure and the construct and the architecture of our curriculum, when maths literacy was introduced in 1998, it was never the intention that the majority of our learners will do mathematics, but the unintended consequences of how the system works and what is measured and what is incentivized has led us to where we are. But at a school level, schools, through their SGBs and decisions that are made at a local school level, are able to make a number of decisions. There's an increasing number of schools today that are deciding to stop offering mathematics altogether. And that's not a decision that's made by a circuit or a district or a province or national. It's a decision that's made by the schools themselves. So schools have a major role to play in influencing the direction of what goes on. When you look at the data, especially around mathematics participation, it's quite interesting throughout the country, throughout all the 9 provinces, to still see that Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal are really high when it comes to the levels of mathematics participation. And that's because of the decisions. Well, it's complex issues, but it's mainly because of the decisions that were made by people who are managing the system in those provinces. Because there are also decisions that are driven from that level, from a provincial level. So I'm just saying, it's a multi-layered issue, but schools have a particularly important role to play in making sure that we can reduce maths anxiety, we can encourage more learners to be confident in taking mathematics. And we've seen that in a number of cases. And then when it comes to the issue of curriculum and curriculum management and coverage, so I agree with the speaker. The issue of school-based assessments, especially at foundation phase, intermediate phase, and senior phase, is a big issue, because what we see in a number of cases throughout the country are cases where, because of SBAs, school-based assessments, children, in foundation phase are sort of promoted to intermediate phase, and the transition of the progression from foundation phase to intermediate phase is not well managed in a number of cases. And you can't always blame the school. Sometimes you've got to blame the system in terms of how, from policy to what happens in terms of measurements to the structures, particularly around the oversight role, particularly of districts. There's a number of areas. I mean, if you want to, you mentioned Sekhukhune as an example. You will find that in a number of districts, there are many vacancies, and district officials, subject advisors, and so on, simply do not have the resources or the budgets to be able to go and play an oversight role in schools. And therefore, with school-based assessments, you find that there's no proper quality control around curriculum management and coverage. But again, it's a very complex issue, but I do say, again, similar to mathematics, schools can play a very important role through school leadership, principals, school management teams in making sure that time on task and curriculum management and coverage is actually increased in schools.
Thank you very much, Doc. We have 1 minute. Prof. Kat, you want to say something in response
just
to?
let Liesl know that I think I've more or less also addressed some of the concerns that you were showing, and completely agree with you that there are numerous studies by MIT and so forth related to brain development. So we do have to tread here with caution. But on the other hand, to exclude it altogether may be not the answer really. So perhaps we have to take best practices from all domains and decide, which would be one. I'm thinking of overcrowded classrooms, for example, and what some of the uses could be, and what is the way in which we do a balance. So this definitely will take this with you offline. Dr. Mkhize, I see Fatima's hand is up. I think we can just take one more question.
Fatima, if you can unmute yourself, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a contribution because I also wrote about AI before COVID, never knowing that AI was going to play a very important role after my article got published. But the thing that I wanted to bring to the attention was knowledge is available to everybody. I mean, it's on everybody's fingertip. But now our roles as teachers have to change because we cannot just stand there and be educators. We have to take the question, the knowledge, and teach the students how to interpret the knowledge and how to question and then apply the knowledge. And I think that is where the role of the teacher, they're still sticking to way back down in the 18th or the 19th century, and they haven't adapted to there is technology. As one of the presenters mentioned, it's not going away. In fact, we need to adapt our way of teaching. And even when we are preparing students to become educators, I think even though that way we need to take already step there. But thank you very much. Enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima. If you could just put a link of your paper in the chat, it might be useful for people who may want to delve into it further. And I would certainly be interested as well. But thank you for your contribution. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, of course, the conversation continues. We've got limited time. I see there are also other hands and there were comments on the chat. The conversation will continue even beyond this limited time that we have. We'll look at these comments and perhaps at some other time we'll also respond to them. And the take that I got from one of the charts there that trying to define the ethics as doing the right thing when no one is looking, doing the right thing when no one is looking. So if we can be able to do that, I think we will be able to influence others towards the common goal of making sure that our learners learn for their success and not for the school success. With that said, Prof. Kat, I leave it to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mkhize. Colleagues, since we brought the conversation of technology into the room, our next item is kind of a little bit of a play in terms of the fact that we took everyone's conversation, all of the speaker conversation, and we asked AI to create a poem. And in the room, we have, in debuting as a poet, Ms. Lesedi, who's going to use the AI rendition of the speaking that has happened. And Lesedi, I hope that you will know that we appreciate you for taking on the task of doing the poetry here. So over to you, Lesedi. Maybe you're muted, Lesedi.
Okay. Apologies about that, colleagues. I wasn't able to unmute. Okay, we'll just do it without the camera. I'm struggling there. The name of this poem is called The Soul of Leadership in Education. Let us call ourselves to pause to see our education system, what it could be. Let us examine our souls with courage and care, for children are waiting, their future is there. From milestones marked ECD to DBE, to maths that unlocks possibility, the 3-stream curriculum widening choice, coding and robotics giving youth a voice. Leadership is quiet, unseen, yet strong, doing the right thing when no one looks on. It is a lantern guiding the way, inspiring others to brighter days. Ubuntu is the rhythm, the moral call, placing accountability at the heart of us all. Learners stand at the center, the pulse, the light. Every decision must honor their right. For who the leader is makes a difference indeed. Their life becomes the lesson. Children read. A role model's example, steady and true, shows what is possible, what we can do. The competency model reminds us to be leaders of courage, integrity, empathy. For ethics is not some hidden decree. We all know the truth, what ought to be. But between knowing and doing, a gap can appear. Leaders must bridge it with choices sincere. Leadership holds a dual intention, to use its power with noble direction, to influence others for greater good, to serve with wisdom as all leaders should. Self-awareness shapes identity's core. A leader wears many hats, yet must be more. Collaboration keeps accountability near. A community of leaders makes a vision clear. For in schools, the touch is profound and true. Touch the school and you touch us too. Traditional leaders in partnership with strong help guide behavior where all belong. They bolster resources, embrace the whole. The school is as the heartbeat, the nation's soul. And now a new voice walks into the room, AI with its questions, promise, and gloom. It enters our schools with queries, not commands. Leaders must guide with wise, steady hands. Equity or exclusion, who gets to learn? Privacy or profiling, where do we turn? Efficiency tempts, but humanity stays. A compass of ethics light our ways. Discern, decide, defend with care, so leaders grow wiser, more self-aware. Technology shapes but does not define the soul of education, the human design. For knowledge expands when guided with heart, and wisdom begins where ethics take part. The future of learning, both bold and new, depends on the choices of leaders like you. Thank you.
Oh, that was brilliant. Colleagues, I tried to put the poem into the chat, but it didn't take, in one long message. I might have copied and pasted a little bit wrong, but we certainly will try and find a way to share this with everybody. But I love the way in which it encapsulated, and particularly the idea that at the end, it actually makes us all responsible. It says that we are the people to make the right choices. That gap between knowledge and what we do, that choice making is what depends on all of us. So thank you so much, Lesedi. That was beautifully read. I really appreciate you for that. And of course, Lindiwe agrees with me. You have a beautiful voice, Lesedi. Well done. And with that, we now ask for our very own UJ colleague, Dr. Christina Amsterdam, who is going to take us through the lessons of today. Christina, we didn't get a chance to really grapple with the Mentimeter responses, so I've asked Mitesh to put it on the screen while you consolidate the learnings for us. Over to you, Christina.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Prof. Kat, for putting on, Prof. Kat and team for putting on just a fabulous day one. I didn't have the opportunity to work with Ms. Lesedi on this background, so I'm a little bit hesitant to switch on the camera because I don't know what the background is going to be like. But I see that there is the Mentimeter results are up there, so maybe I can just go ahead and, if it's okay with you, Prof. Kat, to, or maybe I'll just greet you and.
No problem. That's perfectly fine. I'm just asking Mitesh to please try to increase the size of that Mentimeter screen so that people can actually see. So Mitesh, I don't know, maybe it's because you've got Lesedi as well as the Menti in one space. Maybe if you go back to without them being side by side, it might share the screen a little bit bigger.
Yeah. I have to say, so I can go ahead and continue?
Yes, please go ahead, Christina.
All right. So that poem, it was just brilliant, and it really touched on, you know, all the high points and really just brought everything together beautifully. And I was thinking, oh, so, you know, we have the poem, so there's even no need for me to say anything. But yeah, I'm joking. You know, it touched on many of the issues that that I highlighted too. So I'm overall, I would say that we started with hope, with school as a place of hope. At least that's what I gathered from Dr. Ndrasana's presentation. And then we ended with the importance of a steady ethical compass, as stated by Prof. Kat. The importance of a steady ethical compass for school leaders. So let me start with Dr. Ndrasana. The central to Dr. Ndrasana's presentation was the theme of hope. Hope for, you know, the future of our learners, the future of our youth, and also the centrality of the learner. It was pretty sobering to listen to or to hear about the math crisis, especially that statistics of only 6% of the total number of matriculants who score more than 60% in math. And just highlighting, you know, the implications for our young people, if they do not have what is called pure math. So then Dr. Nkosana goes on to talk about the dark side of leadership and talked about the abuse of power, and that actually is then pulled through by, even Ms. Kuman picked up on the abuse of power. And I want to, at some point, return to the questions that were asked about, or at least one question that was asked about the abuse of power. And then a final point that stood out for me of the first presentation was the reference to a challenged moral compass of when we have leaders who are stealing from the poor. So then we go on to, so that's actually then a good segue to the second presentation by Ms. Kuman, and, central to her presentation was the knowing doing gap. And, by then you have forgotten about school as a place of hope, as we've heard in the first presentation, because now we are into what people are doing and why the unethical things that people are doing, and the choices that people make, and realizing that it's not because they don't know right from wrong. They choose to, for whatever reason, some of them, and Prof. Kat highlighted in the chat box, highlighted, some of the, potential answers to why people, why there is that divide between knowing and doing. Then Ms. Kuman, we talked about the abuse of power, that she continued that theme, and she ends with a powerful quotation where she says, an ethical leader builds, protects, and preserves trust among all stakeholders. And then we get to our colleague, Dr. Bloss, and his student, Mr. Baloy. And now we're really getting into we see the underbelly of what is happening in schools and all the ethically questionable behaviors and practices that we find in schools. And Mia asked a number of really hard-hitting questions around ethical behavior in schools, and and also asked Mr. Baloy about, well, if you say you're wearing these different hats, so how do you treat people who are not from from the same union as you? And Mr. Baloy responded and spoke about the fact that when people see him, he hopes that they see a principal and not as the leader of a particular union. But he did acknowledge, the difficulty in balancing the demands of the different roles. Dr. Blo's work on the role that traditional leaders play in enhancing school community partnerships helped answer the question that I had when Ms. Kuman spoke about the negative role models. We're still talking about the knowing doing gap. And she talked about how much power that the negative role models have. And I had the question then, so how do we counter that? You know, how do we counter that as schools, and thereby instilling hope and, you know, with our learners. And so when we look at the work done by Dr. Blows and the findings, his findings basically, then you sort of get hope, because traditional leaders help with learner behavior, they help secure resources, and they also promote a sense of ownership of the school among the community. And you know, just the fact that the relationship, according to Dr. Blows, seems to be organically generated. So it is, and it's something that came about as, you know, as a result of collaboration and collective action. And then finally, Prof. Kat. She trained a positive lens on the use of AI and the value that AI can bring to the learning process. She talked about navigating ethical tensions, and how school leaders would do that, talked about the ethical responsibilities of school leaders, and ends with what I thought was a good way to end the day, when she stated that ethical leadership requires a steady ethical compass, a clear vision, and strong self-awareness. So with that, I thank you again for the opportunity. It really was a great day. So over to you, Prof. Kat.
Christina, I'm sure the audience will agree with me, no matter how beautiful our AI poem was in summarizing, without you giving this part of the conversation, I think it just allowed us these little nuggets of memory. So thank you so much for capturing each one's contribution and encompassing the learning so beautifully for us today. We really appreciate you, and thank you so very much. Colleagues, we're a little bit over time. I'm sorry about that, but could we please give the opportunity for a colleague, a friend, a sister in the form of Prof. Naidu to just do the vote of thanks and also to close day one. I'm so sorry, Momsi, that we've run over time, but please go ahead and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Kat. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of day one of this third education leadership conference. And I know that you will agree with me that it's really been a wonderful experience, a wonderful 3 hours together. This conference was indeed significant in that UJ turned 20 years, and of course, Kagiso Trust is 40 years. So congratulations to you on reaching that milestone, and I'm sure many more years to come. The conference itself was beautifully structured. Thank you to the organizers. The point that was made across everyone in everyone's presentations was that integrity is the most important thing, most important characteristics that we expect from leaders. And of course, as human beings, we are born with integrity. It's part of our DNA. but how integrity is misused and misplaced is another question. How do we start to close that gap between knowing and doing? I think that was really good. And I really want to thank the organizers. I want to thank all the delegates that attended and our wonderful presenters for their insightful presentations that kept me for the full 3 hours in front of my screen. And we could not have pulled this off without the assistance of the IT people. So thank you all in all to everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the conference today. The keynote speaker was brilliant. I've heard you speak before, so I was expecting that from you. The other speakers were also very, very good for sharing your insightful presentations, your personal experiences as well. And all in all, thanks to everybody. We hope to see you, everyone, tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the same space. And we wish to continue this lovely deliberations that we are having on ethical leadership and leading with integrity. So now I want to close up, or do I hand over to you for the final word, Prof. Kat? Or can we just close up?
No, I think we close now, and thank you to everybody. I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow, and we look forward to furthering the conversation. Have an amazing evening, everybody, and stay blessed and travel safe. Bye-bye.